Solo mode rules are here for Kingdoms Forlorn, or I guess I should call them Squire rules because you can use the Squires for, if you're not playing true solo, but we're going to be talking about true solo mode today and utilizing just one single knight. I am going to just sort of run through exactly how to utilize them and sort of what the initial rules are like for Squire mode or true solo mode, and then I'll give my thoughts and impressions of reading through the rules right off, afterwards, and after I'm done sort of giving a little bit of a how-to, because I know some people like myself are going to be visual learners, and rather than having you read through the rule book and try and figure things out yourself, I figured I would make a little video running through it with you, and then I'll talk about sort of what I think about them and sort of what I hope for the future, because obviously this is like their first iteration of the rules, so it's very, very rough. There's still a lot of work to be done, I think, for the system, and I'll talk a little bit about my I guess, maybe worries about the Squire modes and sort of what I think can be a little bit more beneficial, potentially. I'm no game designer, but I'll talk a little bit of sort of my thoughts and impressions. But overall, it's fairly straightforward. I think it's a great foundation. I think it's just great overall that this thing is going to be a system for people anyways. When it comes to an ambitious game like this, it's very, very nice for Into the Unknown Studios to even consider making a true solo mode or something for the solo player. But like I said, you can actually use the Squire rules even if you're only playing with like maybe one or two other people. So it's great. So if you can't get your original gaming group, your full gaming group in for a night, you can still play with like one or two other friends and still have a full party utilizing the Squires. So to actually set up true, but we're going to be talking about true solo mode here, just because for the Delve specifically, there are actually, at the moment, there aren't really any other additional rules you do when it comes to using the Squires. So let's say if you're playing with two knights and two Squires, the Delve doesn't really have anything too different. However, when it comes to true solo mode, the Delve has its own sort of voting system. There's a lot more going on there. So we're going to set up for true solo mode. We're going to be using Sir Sanch, and we're going to be using three of these Squires. We have Leonard, Bianca, and Andrejovic. And then, of course, there is a fourth knight, Bosch, or Bach, who's the foolhardy Squire, but of course you can't have a full party Squire, so we have to leave one out. They do have different speeds, and they do have different heat levels and combat abilities, so obviously you'll just want to choose the ones that you enjoy the most. So to set them up, you're going to want to grab their standees, of course, and their character sheets, and you're going to want to grab a couple of general acrylic cubes just to keep track of their vigor, as well as their combat arcs. And essentially combat arc levels, just like you, when they attack, they're going to go up levels to give you access to more abilities and leave more tokens. And then the vigor cube is essentially just going to be their shield almost before they actually potentially die, because unlike knights, Squires aren't the most hardy, and they do have a chance of dying quite a bit easier, and we'll get into that once we actually get the clash steps. You're going to want to also grab Squire heat tokens that are equal to their heat limit. So for example, Leonard has 5, Bianca has 4, and Andrejovic has 3. And once you actually utilize heat to like redraw tactic cards or utilize heat abilities, you're going to want to flip those over, and that'll represent your heat level, just like as if you would raising your heat level on your knight. So that is all the setup for the knights. And then when you actually go, you of course want to also grab the Squire Tactics deck, which is a deck of 18 cards. Give that a shuffle. And then when it comes to setting up for the exploration decks, you're going to want to set them up as normal. However, if you're not using Fleischritter, for example, you're going to want to, of course, take out his special events card and just leave that out of the way. But you're going to set things up normal as otherwise. So you're going to take those initial 12 cards, you're going to make split them up into equal parts to make deck 1 and deck 2 for the different parts of the Delve phase. And then when it comes to the knight-specific adventure cards, so these ones, for example, you're going to still put those in just like you would, 2 in each deck, just like you would normally. However, when you do draw these in the Delve phase, the only difference is you just resolve a kingdom adventure and ignore everything else on the card. So it's just essentially just treat these as resolve a random kingdom adventure, and that's how those work. But then all your setup is done. So for when it comes to the Delve phase, the following rules, of course, are only applicable if you're playing true solo mode, and that involves a voting system. So even though you are following the story of your knight, or trying to follow the story of your knight, it does not mean that the Squires don't have their own aspirations or motivations, and they're going to try to drag you where you don't want to go. Hopefully they want to go with you, but, they might want to go do their own thing too. So before each travel step, and of course you're going to be maneuvering everything. So essentially, at the start of each turn, before you do anything, you're going to have a vote of where to go. So if you look on the crossroads, for example, we could choose any of these. You essentially will choose a clue color or a clue to cast as your vote of essentially the direction of where you want to try to go. You can also name a clue that's not listed as an open pathway. However, I would assume more often than not, you're not really going to want to do that. And let's say since we're playing Sur Sanche, we know that Sur Sanche is looking for errant and historic clues or green and yellow clues. So we're going to cast our vote and we're going to say, let's cast my vote as a historic clue. After you're done casting your vote, you're going to then draw 3 tactics cards, and these are going to represent the votes of the different squires. So Leonard is going to get an errant clue. Bianca is going to get a critical success, which means that we can actually treat this as any clue, which is great. So we'll treat it as a historic or yellow clue. And then there is also a critical failure card I should warn you about. So there's one of each. There's a critical success and a critical failure card. You could ignore the middle and the bottom portion. Again, these are dual purpose cards, so they're going to be utilized in both the Del phase and the Clash phase, but we're only worrying about the top part of the card. There is a critical failure card as well, and that essentially means that you will not be able to go in the direction of the clue that you voted for, even if it was the majority vote. So we're going to treat that as a historic clue, and then Andrejovic gets a martial clue. So luckily, because of this critical success, you would then count up all the different colored clues, and whatever has the majority, that is the direction you have to travel. So luckily, because we got the critical success, we're going to treat that as a historic clue. So we have 2 historic clues, 1 errant clue, and 1 martial clue. So we are going to be able to go where I want to go, and we are going to then move to this card. And then from there, you're going to resolve things as normal. You're going to draw an exploration card, you're going to resolve that, you're going to then, use your ability cards if you want to. But let's just say, for example, Bianca didn't draw that. Let's say Bianca drew, let's say Bianca drew a martial clue. Since there are 2 martial clues here, we would then have to say, Bianca and Andrejovic say, screw you, Michael. We're not going left. We're going down instead. So you would have to go there. However, there are a couple of different ways we can augment the vote. You can either lose your vigor, or you can raise the threat level to ignore cards. And you can do this multiple times. So, since no other person drew a historic clue or voted for historic clue, if I wanted to actually go where I wanted to go, I would have to ignore all 3 of these. So I could then, lose 2 vigor and raise the threat level by 1 to ignore each of these cards and say, it's my way or the highway. That's a pretty hefty cost, but hey, if you want to actually reveal the Sur Sanche's story, there's a little bit more of a price you have to pay when it comes to squires. There are, of course, a couple of other options as well. If everyone voted for a different clue and it was a draw, you would then roll a random direction and go there. Additionally, if there is a clue that it doesn't have an option on the pathway, so let's just say, for example's sake, we're on this one, and because there are no martial clues on this card, however, that's the one that won, we would then have to go to a direction that didn't give you any clue, meaning we either have to go to like a small pathway, or we would have to go to a backtrack and go to a tile that we've already explored. Anywhere that just doesn't give you a clue is the easiest way to think about it. And then once you're actually done the vote, you would then take all the cards and put them on the bottom of the deck and go on your merry way. If you drew the critical success or the critical failure card, you would shuffle the tactics deck when you put the cards in. So that does play a big part in sort of how you do the Del phase, but that essentially is the Del phase in a nutshell. It's fairly straightforward, but you can sort of see it's going to be interesting playing. I'm actually interested to see how a full playthrough is gonna pan out, because obviously that was just one turn, but I have some thoughts for sure. But that essentially does it for the Del phase. I don't think I missed anything. Let me give a quick scan, but the rulebook also isn't very long. But yeah, I pretty much got everything. All right, so then we are going to move to the Clash phase. So once you've done the Del phase as normal and you've ran out of the first exploration deck and you start the first Clash phase, you're going to, of course, move things over. You are going to take your tactics deck and you're going to give it a shuffle because, again, you're going to be using them for the Clash phase as well. Now, for the clash phase, for the most part, the squires operate just like knights. So, for example, you set them up in the same starting positions as you would the knights. They also have one combat action and one move action per turn. When it comes to their abilities, just like your ability cards, you can use them before, in between, or after your combat and your move actions. So there are a lot of similarities there. And obviously, like with attacking, you're going to raise their passion level by 1, so on and so forth. Is a couple of different big differences, though. They do ignore quite a few keywords. So they actually don't suffer damage from anything that is not an attack. But they do suffer a lot of keywords that are movement based. So for example, when it comes to like the Iron Cast, they will suffer gang up, or they'll suffer pushback, for example, and knockdown, knockback, so on and so forth. However, they won't suffer damage from things that aren't an attack, and also keywords, for example, like crash. Like crash, for a knight, you would not get knocked down and you would suffer 1 damage. However, for the squires, they would only get knocked down, but they wouldn't suffer the 1 damage because they actually don't have a health track. They just essentially just have 1 vigor marker, essentially, if you want to call it that. They have 1 sort of get out of jail free card when they are attacked. They only suffer when they actually are attacked themselves. And so we'll run through what that means. So let's say, for example, this Iron Cast moved up to Bianca and attacked. We're going to draw an AI card just like normal. And for all intensive purposes, when it references knights on cards or things like that, squires are considered knights. So that's something to keep in mind. So we got Isolator. So you are going to roll just like normal. So squires will still have to try and dodge out of the way. So now that part is actually not specified in the rulebook, but I would assume that's how it goes. I don't really see why it wouldn't. So we're going to just roll a few dice, because obviously we have to roll 3 dice for this. It's 9 or higher to dodge. And of course, we got 2, 6, and 2. Of course, we didn't. However, what this means is we would then, if they have a Vigor Cube, you would remove the Vigor Cube and not take any damage, ignore the damage portion, and you would essentially just resolve the rest of the attack. So after attack, it would gang up 3. Again, they suffer pushback, gang up, so on and so forth. So they would gang up 3 after that. However, the next time that Bianca's hit, after that, they would have to draw Judicium cards. Every attack after that is going to be a Judicium draw, straight up. So squires aren't as hefty as knights. They go down, it seems like they go down very, very easily. And depending on the AI level card, you're going to be drawing potentially more Judicium cards. So obviously, we know now, right now in the demo, you only have a 50-50 chance of living or dying for the squires. However, and that's only for AI level 1. If it was an AI level 2 attack that attacked the squire and they didn't have a vigor token on their character sheet, they would then have to add in another you die card. So their chance increases to 66% dying. And then if it was AI level 3, they have to put in another one. I think that's, yeah. AI level 1, you died Judicium card. AI level 2, you died Judicium cards. And AI level 3 is 3, you died Judicium cards. So they have a very, very good chance of dying. Now, they can redraw using their own heat. So they can gain heat, and they can actually gain heat multiple times if they wanted to redraw multiple times. But just like if you are doing second chance for knights, for example, you do have to put back in the card that you shuffled in. So let's say I draw a death card, I would have to put this back in the deck and then reshuffle to, redraw again. And they died again anyways. So it's still not 100% a guarantee to survive with the squires as well. So yeah, they're very, very squishy. Additionally, when it comes to their squire abilities, they can only use them each once per round, and it's shared between all the squires. Doesn't matter how many squires you're playing with. So if I used Andrejovic to do squire pose to stand up, Bianca and Leonard can't use that ability for the round. So you can only use each ability once per round for the whole squire group. Which is an interesting decision. Not really sure why they did that, but that it is what it is. Now, again, that might be a rule book error. Like, again, these are very, very rough draft rules, But you can see by the knight abilities, I think this is supposed to say squire abilities. Squire abilities can be used once per round and are shared between all squires, which is a little bit rough sometimes. Now, when it comes to attacking, for the most part, they operate the same. Like I said, they have one movement action. They each have their own respective movements on the left. So 4 for Andrejovic, 3 for Bianca, and 4 for Leonard. They have to be adjacent to attack unless their character sheet specifies otherwise. I think in the demo, as of now, all of them only have melee capabilities, even Leonard, even though he has a bow, for example. So that's something to consider. So let's say we wanted to attack with Bianca and we wanted to attack this Iron Cast dead. We have to be adjacent to them, of course. You would then utilize the tactics decks, and utilize the tactics deck for both the attack and the power roll. Now, just like for knights, when you attack, you would raise your passion level by 1. The only difference here is the squires, they don't get all of the different levels for their bonus. So unlike, for knights, for example, if I was level 4 knight, I would get the benefits of the 1, 2, 3 track in addition to the 4th track. Not for the squires. The squires only get the level of the level that they're on. So if I'm on the level 3, I can only choose the left box here or the right box for my benefits for that attack. So there's a lot less flexibility. But you do, they've obviously compensated for that by giving you a lot more tokens earlier on. So it takes less attacks to get more tokens in the pool. So let's say I wanted to attack with Bianca. I would raise the passion level by 1. I would then draw a Squire Tactics card to represent my attack and look at the middle thing. So this is your dice roll, essentially, for the attack. We got an 8 on our card, and we know that for the Iron Cast dead, it only takes a 7 or higher to hit them. So that is a successful hit. Now, as opposed to gathering power dice to roll power, you would, again, just draw another Squire Tactics card. You can also use Heat for Squires to redraw your attack, if you missed, obviously. But this is for the power roll, so we would then draw a second Squire Tactics card, and the bottom part would represent our power roll. So we got 3 power and 2 chalice symbols, so if we had break tokens in here, we can utilize those. You would after getting a successful attack, of course, you would draw a body part as normal too. So we got this man at bones. We got 3 power on our power draw, so we actually got a successful hit. And then you would resolve everything as normal. Now, one big difference as well when it comes to squires is squires can actually use heat to redraw their power draw in addition to their attack draw. So whereas for knights have to get to a specific part on their track before they can actually re-roll their power dice. So that's one nice benefit to the squires. Additionally, at the start of each turn, squires will regain 1 heat, and that's it. So they can go through quite a bit of heat in a round. However, their heat comes back much slower than knights, so it does take a little bit more to manage. Additionally, if your knight goes down during a clash, you can still play with just the squires. So if your knight dies in the clash, don't worry. Maybe your squires can pick up the slack and finish the job. So you can still continue the clash phase with them only. And that's pretty much it. That's all that we have really so far for the rules when it comes to the squires for both the delve and the combat. I might have missed a couple of things, but I don't think so. Again, it's fairly straightforward. For the most part, they do operate like knights with some big caveats. And, for my first impressions, I'm really not sure how effective they're going to be. I think without some balancing in other areas of the game, I think playing true solo mode with squires is hard mode. Like you are essentially trading, they are a little bit more streamlined, especially without having to roll, without having to worry, without having to worry about gear. Oh, that's another thing is squires don't get any gear. So there are less things to manage. You don't have ability cards. However, you are losing so much power and utility from the knights and their gear and their ability cards and their different abilities on their heroic tracks and stuff like that. Their heat limits, for example, like I don't see them, I think that makes sense thematically. They're squires, they're not knights, they're not like the main adventurers. But you're essentially playing the game normally, but with less effective players. So I'm interested to see if they're going to be adding more things to these rules to balance it, maybe for battles even. I don't know how they would do that, but I mean, like, let's just take for example their attack. Like, when a squire gets attacked, they're pretty much more often than not always going to lose their vigor cube right off the bat, and the next attack after that has a 50-50 chance of just killing them. And especially with how easy it is for them to utilize heat, however, they can only gain 1 heat back per turn. They might not even have enough to re-roll the Judicium cards. So they are more susceptible to dying, and I'm very, very interested to see how effective they are going to be at actually attacking. Because especially when it comes to attacking, they of course don't have the benefits of weapons and the special abilities that comes with it. Now, of course, that's traded off with the fact that the different cards do have quite a few power symbols. Like there are always guaranteed to be power symbols on the cards, other than the critical failure card, I think, is the only one that doesn't have one. So that is one nice thing. Additionally, every single tactics card does have a chalice symbol, so you are essentially incentivized to always put down break tokens when you're able to. Whereas, like, sometimes you don't really have to when it comes to only playing with knights. But there's the different spread of cards. Also, when I looked at the different spread of cards, there are multiple cards that roll on the 8, and there are multiple cards that roll on the 3. However, there's a lot of other cards that only have one number associated with them when it comes to the attack roll. I'm no mathematician, so I don't really know the different percentage on like how effective they are to attacking compared to rolling a dice. But that is something interesting to take into account. They also still utilize the knight pool as normal, so that's another thing I forgot to mention. So when it comes to like opening tokens, they still get the benefit of that when it comes to their roll, even if they're not rolling a dice. And the clash phase, I'm not like as worried about. I am quite worried about the delve phase. I don't know if I like the voting system. I think on paper it's interesting. It does thematically make sense that they would want to go their own way. However, I think it makes for a less fun experience for you as a solo player, because if you're playing solo, you are only getting the enjoyment of your night. The squires don't have a story themselves, so when they're pulling you in different directions, they're not gaining clues, you're not revealing any more story, you're just getting pulled away from your objective, and that doesn't feel very fun in my opinion. Especially when it comes to trying to augment the vote, I think you're paying a much heftier cost, whereas if you're playing with your friends or playing even with just one other person, and it's their turn and they go in a different direction, that's maybe you don't get one of your clues, you're not really as hurt by that, because you're playing with a friend, so that's perfectly fine. Additionally, they have their own rule book if they're playing another night, so you're still getting a cool story, you're still learning more about the world, and so that's not a bad thing. Additionally, there's just less randomness to it. Even if they go into a different direction, they still might make a good decision of they might still make a proper decision of like, hey, my direction has a large tile, so we have a better chance of revealing a boss tile. Whereas with the voting system, you might get like 2 turns in a row where you might get like a random direction rolled, and you essentially just wasted 2 turns. And especially when it comes to a mechanic where especially in the second delve phase, if you run out of cards, you essentially just lose the delve, and you've just essentially wasted a run. Well, maybe not wasted a run, but you essentially fail a delve at that point. And the price to pay for augmenting the votes is pretty hefty. Like, even playing a regular game where I was controlling 4 knights, there were a lot of times where the threat level came into play, and like you had to do the secondary effects to these, exploration cards. And those really, really hurt. So getting that threat level up is really not something you want to do. In addition to that, you still end up losing vigor along the way in a normal delve, even without the squires. So having to lower your vigor even more just to augment their vote so you can, actually get something going in your narrative story, that's a pretty big thing as well. So yeah, those are my initial impressions of the rules. Again, they have a lot of work to do. This is the first iteration. This is generally just an introduction into how the squires might play out. But I am a little bit worried about them. I think the most effective way to play, if if this is like the main way that these are going to be implemented, I think the best way to play would be with, even if you're playing true solo, control 2 knights and play with 2 squires. It still gives you a little bit less to manage. However, you still have a little bit more customization in how to compose your party, because you could have 2 knights that complement each other very, very well. Additionally, you don't have to follow the Squire Delve rules then. So then you could still have more control over where you want to go, and you could still get more narration as well. And that would still work better even in the Clash phase, because again, the Squires really aren't that effective, in my opinion, combatively. Again, I haven't done a run yet with the Squires, but just playing it out of my head, and knowing how important some of like these ability cards are when it comes to combat, and how important your gear is, especially when it comes to combat, not having those when it comes to the squires, and seeing how their combat arcs are, I'm hesitant. But that's essentially my first impressions, and that's sort of how the squire mode rules work. I am really, really glad. Again, like I said before, I'm still really, really glad they're implementing something like this. I still think it's good to have. I'm definitely going to be recording a video, and we'll probably go through Kara or Fleischritter, because we haven't done those yet on the channel. And I'll do a full solo mode delve. We'll actually see how it is in action. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and we'll go from there. But this is a very, very early rough draft of the rules. I'm sure it'll get better. I have full faith into the Onion Studios for actually further developing this, and I do think it's a really, really good start. Like, I actually do like for the most part, I think it's very, very cool how they created a deck of cards that are dual purpose, because that designing something like that, I can't imagine how hard it is to design something like that, and I think that's actually a pretty cool way to do it. I think it comes down more to balancing things and trying to make the squires like decently effective, or at least bringing the difficulty down in battle if you are using squires, because you are using like players that aren't as effective as knights. But that's what I have to say for this video. I don't want to make this video too long. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I know it was longer than, if you were to actually probably read through these rules yourself and learn the squire mode rules yourself. But I mainly wanted to make this video to give my first impressions of the rules and sort of get your guys' thoughts on it as well. Let me know in the comments if you've played with these rules already. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know if they do actually run really, really smoothly. And let me know what other things that you would like to see from the Squire mode rules, because I'm sure Into the Unknown Studios will be watching this video and checking out the comments. So they deserve all the feedback that they can get, because we, of course, want to make this system as good as possible, just as much as they do. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. I, of course, do also have some more Too Many Bones gameplay coming soon, so hopefully you'll see that, as well as some Aeon's End gameplay as well, because I got that card game, that deck builder, and I'm really, really enjoying it. But until then, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.